And our next speaker is just being mic'd up. And this guy's pretty awesome. Ross has designed and produced an amazing life-saving product. I'll let him introduce what it is, but basically, it's for lifeguards, and it saves lives. And it's awesome. I love it. And he's also been on the BBC show, Be On Your Own Boss, and he's had investment from Richard Branson. So I'll let him tell you all about it. But yeah, warm welcome for Ross.
Good afternoon. So thanks for the introduction. My name's Ross Kemp, and I founded ASAP Watercrafts. And the product is a little one-person launch rescue craft. So it's a little electric watercraft a lifeguard can throw in the water and get out to casualties quicker. And I came up with this idea for the product, and I'd like to tell you about my journey of bringing the product to market. And I've also had a good thing, because today's all about failure. I love the idea of embracing failure and celebrating failure. So I've had a good think about what failures I've come across in that journey to production. So there's been lots, and I'm going to share them with you as well. So I'll start off just giving you a bit of background about myself and the product. The product was made in a tent in the back of my garden, and the first prototype which I made was made entirely by hand. And this was my student project. I studied product design at Loughborough, and as part of that course we had to design a product and prototype it, test it, redesign it, and get it as far as we can in that 9 months. And this was my student project. And I chose to make it. You can't see the images too clearly here, but this is my tent workshop up here. And I set this up in my garden, not because the university hasn't got incredible workshops, but because they closed at 5 o'clock, and I was itching to keep working on it. I had loads of sanding to do. So I set this up in my garden. I spent about 4 months making this by hand. And you can't see it very well up here, but that's what it started out as, which is basically chunks of foam stuck together. And then I spent 4 months in the tent by myself, hand sanding that until it got to that down at the bottom. And actually, I'll just flick back to that. So then this prototype here was great, because when I graduated, the university turned around and said, we really like your product, and we'd like you to take it a little bit further, and we'd like to help you turn that into a business and teach you how to write a business plan and about marketing and finance and all these amazing things. So I was lucky enough to be taken on as a member of the studio, which is here on campus. And there's a group of us that bring our businesses and develop our businesses to market. And the university helps us in doing that with a little bit of seed funding and all the mentoring and support. So that was what happened from that prototype that I made by hand in my tent. And that prototype allowed me to get my degree. It allowed me to get my first job. I got a job designing vacuum cleaners at the vacuum cleaner brand Vax. So I did what every other graduate did. I went out, got a job, and it was an amazing job as well. That was a dream job for a product designer, to be working for a large company and be designing stuff which is getting sold in shops. That's incredible. But for me, that wasn't quite enough. I was looking at the company thinking, I could do that. I could start a company like this, and I knew how to grow it. And I was part of the studio, and I was working on that evenings and weekends. So every evening and every weekend, I'd rush home from work and work on developing my watercraft. And it was during one of these evenings and weekends, I very spontaneously applied for a BBC Three programme called Be Your Own Boss. Which Jacob has mentioned earlier as well. This is how I first met Jacob. And I never expected to get through. For me, it was just something I tinkered with in my garage at weekends. And I applied for this show. I got through to the first stage. And then I got through to the next stage. And it got to the point where the BBC said to me, okay, you're through to the final stages now. We need you for 6 weeks, and we need you to intensively develop the product and the business. I was still working at Vax. I had a full-time job. So I had to go into the director's office and say, I'd really like 6 weeks off starting from Monday, if that's okay. And incredibly, he said yes. He said, you've got to go for this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And during that 6 weeks, I intensively started taking it seriously, setting it up as a business, developing the product, which is 6 weeks is not enough time to develop a product properly. This top image is the prototype, which I made in that 6 weeks. And then the end of the show was me testing it in the water and then pitching the business and the product to Richard Reed from Innocent Smoothies. The best thing about this 6 weeks was I got introduced to Richard Branson, which was absolutely amazing, and he made the offer to me. He said to me, you've got to take this out to Australia. Australia is your market. Let's get you out to Australia and test it with the best lifeguards in the world. So that was really the best thing which came from that TV show. So going back to work at Vax, I still had my job. After the TV show, the 6 weeks ended, I went back to work, and that was really tough to try and lead a normal life again after all this craziness that had happened. And there was press which was going on surrounding the TV program as well. I wasn't allowed to tell any friends or families about what had happened because I'd signed BBC confidentiality agreements. I started trying to cram in even more of my own business work in lunchtimes and evenings and weekends around my job. I had a half-an-hour lunch break. Some days in that half-an-hour lunch break, I'd manage to do a radio interview and a phone interview with a journalist, and I'd be running across Birmingham in time to get back in time to design more vacuum cleaners. So that was a craziness, but I still had to find ways to, I was still searching for that way of how could I have the confidence to leave my full-time job. And what gave me that step of being able to leave my job was winning the Lloyd's TSB Best UK Startup Awards. And it was, again, one of those very spontaneous things I applied for, like the TV show, and I was lucky enough to win Best UK Startup. And that gave me the confidence to actually fully go for it, leave my full-time job, and most importantly, I put a team together to help me. Someone's calling me. And most importantly, I put a team together to help design the prototype properly, because that prototype we developed during the 6 weeks of the BBC show, we rushed and it wasn't long enough. So I put together a team and we did it properly this time. This is the pre-production prototype that I've got up here. Feel free to come and have a look afterwards, and please don't take it apart though. And we did it properly this time with this prototype, and I was able to leave my full-time job and really go for it. And so the stage we're at now with the product, we're at a pre-production stage, and I'm working with manufacturing partners. We're hoping to manufacture the first batch of these at the end of this year. And I've just got back from taking Richard Branson up on his incredible offer of taking it around Australia. So I spent 6 weeks in Australia with the product. Here we go, here's some holiday photos, some work photos.
Stressful.
I spent 6 weeks. I hired a camper van and I drove from beach to beach along the east coast of Australia with 2 of these in the back of the camper van. I drove about 5,200 kilometres and just went from beach to beach and just tried to meet as many lifeguards as possible, tested the product with them, got their opinions. There's so much fantastic feedback. And I did some filming with Bondi Rescue as well. If anyone watches the show, that'll be on in a couple of weeks' time. And that was absolutely amazing, all with the sponsorship of Virgin as well. So I took him up on that amazing offer. So really, that was a little bit about myself and about the product and the stage we're at now. So I really wanted to skip on to what today's more about, the failures. And I tried to have a think, what are my sort of top 3 things that went wrong? And I mean, my approach is a little bit different to perhaps some of the other speakers, because I'm a product designer, so stuff goes wrong every day with the product, and that's how you develop a product. Things are always breaking. But just to skip to that first prototype, I call it the 30-second watercraft, because it really did work for 30 seconds. And then it broke, and then seawater got inside and corroded the electronics which I'd made on my bedroom floor. But I tested it with the RNLI, which was absolutely incredible. I just called them up and they said, yeah, come along, we'll test it. But that was the best thing about that prototype, was it got me to the next stage. It showed me the idea, and it gave me that faith that I can make this work. And even though it doesn't work at the moment, I know how to make it work. And just having that confidence of having something tangible to demonstrate what your idea was incredibly valuable. And really, that prototype gave me the faith that, all right, it doesn't work at the moment, but I know how I'm going to make it work. And just bear with me, I know the right people, and we're going to make this work. So that was what that was all about. Even though it only worked for 30 seconds. This lifeguard here, I think he was expecting to be skipping along in the water when I called him up to ask him whether he'd take part in this, but actually it was just a little pootle along for 30 seconds and then it died. But it gave me that seed and that idea, and thought, well, they could see it had potential. So that was the first one. And this is one of my favorite quotes, that if we do what we've always done, then we'll get what we always got. So that first prototype for me was about pushing the boundaries and saying, let's create something completely wacky and obscure. It might not work, but it's having that ability to put your balls on the line and say, I'm going to do it because no one else has done it. And it was that which spurred it all on and led on to the next step. So the second one was what I've found in this journey is that if you are going to fail, I think it's a good idea to do it in front of as many people as possible, and preferably on a national TV show if you can. Because I think then you share that failure with all those people. They're on the journey, they're on the adventure with you. So, and the more people you get involved, they can help you with it. And I mean, from that TV show, even though this is the prototype working here at the end of that BBC show, and it worked pretty well actually for making it in a garage over 6 weeks. And to give you an idea how tight we were on timings for that, we put the two lids, the two halves of the watercraft together half an hour before the cameras turned up to take it to the lake. And in my head, I knew that the sealant we were using took 24 hours to dry, and that was never going to be dry by the time it went in the lake. But it worked okay, and it got us to that next stage, and that was what it was all about. At the time, it was so scary taking this thing, which I knew how dangerous the electronics were as well, and I was getting in the water with it. But I was happy to do that in front of a lot of people and on the BBC. And actually, after the BBC, I took the same prototype in the same lake with CNN International News. And then it was from that I started getting interest from all around the world, and from America and from across Europe and in Australia. And that allowed me to start finding my first customers as well. So this is a cross-section of the entrepreneur's brain. So I think this was something I really felt after being declined the investment from Richard Reed from Innocent Smoothies. It was all about trying to keep the faith, and we use this phrase a lot with my team that we developed the product with, about keeping the faith and just knowing that if you keep going with it, there will be something which will turn up, and we know that it does work, we know that it will work, just keep that faith. And for me, it's not a religious thing, but it's all about that faith in what you're doing and knowing that we know how to make it work. Just keep going, you're going to get there. And this image sums it up perfectly. I stole this from Richard Reed. He uses this in his presentations, but I really like it because it is sometimes like this, and I think that demonstrates it well. So the third, what I'd class as my biggest failure, is again with the product break-in. And going back to the idea of product designers constantly fail every day. I remember back at VAX, I'd test a vacuum cleaner, a prototype every day, and I'd have to stick on a bit of material, test it again. And I did that for months and months, and a lot of them failed. But that's what you do to develop a product. You keep failing with many, many prototypes, and often spend hundreds of thousands of pounds in the process. But then the end product, which is on the shelf, is the one that works, because you did all those testing bits which failed. And this image here is an image of the inside of one of the prototypes, which I took out to Australia. And in the first week of that offer from Richard Branson in Australia, sponsored by Virgin, this is incredible, this is a once-in-a-lifetime offer. And in that first week, it was actually the first time we took it in the water, in Australian waters, it broke. And I was there in the back of my camper van in 40-degree heat, figuring out how I'm going to make this work. And something which I realized then was, I realized the way that I deal with failure, and I'd like to share that with you today because it might be useful for some of you. And how I deal with failure is the rule of 3. I really like the number 3. I think it's a magic number. And I think whenever I come up against a failure or something which is going wrong, I always try and find 3 solutions. And I hope that one of those solutions comes through. So out in Australia, on the other side of the world, once-in-a-lifetime offer, which I really want to make work, the product broke. And so the first thing I did was contact the UK engineer back in this country. I then contacted a consultant, electrical engineer in Melbourne, found him on the internet. Bear in mind, this is all at 10 o'clock at night in a McDonald's using their free Wi-Fi. And the third thing I did was email someone that got in touch months and months ago. I said, oh, how are you doing? It'd be great to meet up. I tagged on the end. By the way, if you know any electrical engineers, I really need one because I've got some big meetings lined up and the product's not working. So I went fishing at 10 o'clock at night in a McDonald's using their free Wi-Fi, and in that instance, I really wanted to tell you about this because the most unlikely of those 3 things I sent out came through. That lady, Monique, who'd contacted me months and months ago, it turned out her husband was an electrical engineer. So she called me up at about 10:30 now and said, we'll come round tomorrow morning. So I did. I went round and we had bacon sandwiches, and I ended up in her attic with her husband, who, by the way, happened to have spare parts for my watercraft because he builds electric aeroplanes. I'd used electric aeroplane parts in this prototype. How incredible. I was on the other side of the world, and from a spontaneous email, I was suddenly there with her husband fixing my watercraft, and he had a 316 capacitor, which I needed. It's amazing. So that's how I deal with failure. I try and find at least 3 routes of how I'm going to overcome it. And that kind of reassures myself that hopefully the chances are that one of those will come through. And that was a great moment in Australia. I got the watercraft fixed, took it on tour for 6 weeks, and it was a real success and a real great way to test the product as well. This is, I wasn't sure whether to leave this slide in actually, because I was really toying with this last night, because there's a real quick story behind this. Again, following on from that rule of 3, I wasn't sure whether to tell it to you because I'm not sure if what I did was illegal. So I think this is probably the best way to find out. Again, the rule of 3. My friend, when I lived in London, lent me his bike and his lock as well, to lock it up with. And unfortunately, I snapped off the key in the lock, and his really cool fixie bike was left stranded in London. So I went home, tearing my hair out, thinking, how on earth am I going to get his bike off the street so it doesn't get nicked? And again, rule of 3, I sent out 3 routes of getting me out of this sticky situation. And the first one was email the people that made the locks, go, your lock's crap, the key broke off in it was only normal use. I didn't think that was going to work, so I looked for other options as well. The next logical option was call up a locksmith. They quoted me £70 to cut the lock open, and I didn't really want to spend that. So I tried to find a third one. I was Googling, reading on forums. This must have happened to people before, and it had, and someone had got the fire brigade out and they used those hydraulic cutters to break the lock. So I thought, oh, I'll give the fire brigade a call. So I did, and they said yes. And they brought along a whole fire engine of firefighters and these hydraulic cutters and cut off the lock. And I had my mate's bike back, and I promised him I'd buy him a new lock. But what was strange about this is my rule of 3. The first one came through as well. The lock company emailed me back saying, oh, we're really sorry about this. You know, please pay for a locksmith. We'll give you the money for it and we'll replace the lock. And I had the lock and the bike back. so I started thinking, well, what if I pretended I'd got a locksmith out, claimed the money back, and got a new lock? I could be quids in from this mistake. So I'm really sorry to say, but that's what I did. I forged an invoice from a locksmith for £70, sent it off to the lock company, and they paid me the £70. But also, they called me up and said, oh, I'm really sorry, we haven't got that lock anymore. Could we replace it with a better model? So I said, yeah, okay. So they sent me a higher quality lock, which was worth £150 rather than £20. But by this time, I'd already bought my mate a replacement. So anyway, the end of the story is I sold that better lock for 150 quid on eBay. Got my 70 quid from the lock company. I was about 200 quid in at the end after buying my mate a new lock. I shouldn't have done that. Please don't do that, because it screws over companies. But from this was before I started my business, and this was my first insight of that rule of 3 really works, and sometimes 2 of them come through as well. I don't recommend doing it. I think it might be fraud, but I'm not sure. So really, I wanted to show you this picture. I'm coming to the end now, but this is my favourite picture. This is up in my office where I work, and there's lots of moments, not to do with fraud or locks, but to do with my business and the watercraft. There's a lot of moments where you feel like this, and you feel like you're jumping into the void. And I mean, the text I always put with this is think big, start small, but do start. And this is how I felt when I left my full-time job. I felt like I was jumping into the unknown. But it was an amazing rush. And what I love about this image is that this was taken in the 1960s. There was no Photoshop. They actually did this for real, which I think is even more incredible, because that really sums up what that image is about. So the final thing I wanted to say before, I know we've got lunch coming up now, which I'm really looking forward to as well. But the really big question I like to end with is, but why? Why do you do this? Why do you work unpaid for years on end developing a product to get it to market? Why on earth would you want to leave your full-time job, security, a pension, all those healthcare benefits and security of a regular wage? Why on earth would you want to leave that behind with all these prospects of failure? And for me, the way I like to sum this up is with a quote from Tesla. Tesla invented AC electricity, which is what we all use in our houses today. And he said, I do not think there is any thrill that can go through the human heart like that felt by an inventor as they see some creation of the brain unfold into success. Such emotions can make a man forget food, sleep, friends, love, everything. And for me, that sums up why I do it and why I think a lot of people in this room do what they do. There is a big prospect of failure, but we do it because we get a kick out of it. And it's a real buzz when you're jumping off that wall, going into the unknown and putting your balls on the line. And how you spend your days is ultimately how you spend your life. So I think if you can do something which you're getting a real kick from, then that's why I'm in it. And I don't think you should be afraid of failure. So that was a little bit about me. My name is Ross Kemp, and feel free to have a look at the watercraft, and thanks for listening to me.
Thanks, Ross. We'll take 1 or 2 questions, and then if you want to chat to Ross after, you can chat to him over lunch. Okay?
So can it be a silly question?
Yes, definitely.
So I'm thinking there's a business opportunity here. Didn't the fire people ask you if it was your bike?
The way you have to prove that is by showing them the other half of the key that's snapped off.
Okay.
So I showed them this broken key and said, there's the other half of the key in there.
Anyone else?
When you got through your first million, you got some spare change, you could always give that money back.
Yeah,
Feel better in yourself.
No, that's a good idea. I did actually buy the firemen some biscuits as well.
Anyone else? Okay, brilliant. Give a round of applause to Ross.